This episode is a part 2 episode, meaning that it's a continuation of the conversation from our previous episode, part 1. If you haven't listened to that, now's a great time to pause, listen to part 1 first, and then come back for part 2.
Welcome to Heather's Most Precious. I'm Heather. I am a wife and a mother and an insurance agency owner, a friend, and a PTA advocate. I am so excited to talk about all of the things that I find most precious here within our community, within our lives, and within our friendships and relationships. Here on Heather's Most Precious. I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head with road trips. We are ever changing and evolving, and I think that the faster we embrace that, especially with our partners, the more that we're able to. And I think it took the accident that I was in a couple years ago for me to realize like how much control I actually like to have, and it's a lot. Yep. And I don't know why I didn't realize it sooner. And my husband's we always joke that he's in sloth mode. He's just not in a hurry to go anywhere and do anything. And
just chill.
He even, when we recorded together the other day, he listened back to a piece and he's like, I actually talk really slow. I'm like, yes, you do. Very slow. But it's neat to be able to embrace the parts of him that are so much better than me, right? Are the parts that make him slow, right, in speed and make him not in a hurry. And he's like, well, I just want to drive the long way home. And I think that's really sweet. Now, I don't when we're late for something.
Right?
But
caveats.
Absolutely. But I think that specifically having time in the car to engage, and we love to go to concerts. And so being able to drive, we just went to Atlanta last weekend, see Chris Stapleton, for kind of a post-birthday for my husband. And just the time, we actually finally, our 15-year wedding anniversary was in June, and we didn't do anything then because it was midweek and kids in sports. And so we got to stay over, and just the time being able to celebrate the life that you've built, but also, yes, joke around and have fun and sing songs and be silly and enjoy new food spots. But again, learning, right? There's a new song that comes on, you're like, oh, I didn't know you listened to them, or just different things that help make your marriage new again.
And so kind of piggybacking off of that, from a point standpoint, opening up a new business, to me is very similar in terms of, you're right, I didn't realize how much control I like to have until you realize that there's only so much control you can have in this situation. Like starting a business, you're very dependent on a lot of other people, and you can't just do everything, yourself. And so I definitely resonate with what you just said, because the past 2 years, because we've been open, we just celebrated our 1-year anniversary. The year before that was a lot of prep. And of course. So the past 2 years have been such a growing experience in terms of, so there's this phrase that I really like called trust your wings, not the branch. So birds don't have confidence because they trust the branch beneath them. They have confidence because they trust their wings to make them fly. And so I just realized how much I was depending on the external circumstances to keep me calm. And then you open up a business and you're like, oh no, I cannot depend on external circumstances because the bridge is always breaking. And so it's been such a growing experience in terms of releasing control and just having confidence in your competence and knowing that whatever happens, I mean, literally, you're going to get through it. Absolutely. And just not being so scared of the unknown or the worst that could happen and all of that stuff. So it's, definitely in terms of a marriage, that is communication and learning new things and stuff, but also in opening up a business, learning new things and valuing learning new things and, critiques and all of these things and how to be better. I think they're very similar circumstances in terms of what you learn about yourself.
Yes.
It's been very interesting what I've learned about myself, like the mirror that has been put up, not only in being married and relating to somebody on that level, but also being a business owner, and just you just learn so much about yourself.
I oftentimes, before I even go to my team about something, I'm like, okay, did I communicate this effectively? How could I have done, and like, have I separated emotion, or what, whatever that is. But I think the more that you do look inward, right, the more you have an opportunity to grow and better yourself. And you're so right. Everything is about that, right? Because everything is relational.
Yes.
Whether it's in the business sense, whether it's agency owner to client, whether it's cookie to hand, whatever it looks like, there's that relational component that, if that is healthy, which takes time, but it also takes both people, right, to embrace the season you're in, really look at making the change that's necessary, but truly just remembering the why, right? Why did you say I do? Or why did you open the business? What was the intention behind it? And how do we continue to bring that why to life? Right? By you making new recipes, right? Constantly recreations. And how do we make this better? Or here, how do we reach more people? What does that look like? While still having the heart of the reason behind it.
Yeah, it's been so interesting because I personally feel like the success of a relationship depends on the success of the individuals and how they can come together as whole people and create a very successful relationship. And so it's been interesting in terms of my personal journey. When we first decided to do this store, I was a self-admitted introvert, and I was a people pleaser, and so I was like really scared and socially anxious of being like, what if people don't like me? You know what I mean? And just through this whole process, I just recently realize that I'm actually an extrovert who is just really scared of being judged. And it's like, so now through this process, and like with my husband holding my hand because he's always been an introvert, just been able to be like, oh my gosh, I'm an extrovert. Like, I do like people and making those connections, and like this kind of like inherent vulnerability that comes with meeting somebody new and getting to know somebody. And I just love every part of it. And the connection has been my favorite part, because it just forces me to kind of like get out of my comfort zone, and you're meeting all these new kinds of people and what they bring to you, not in terms of what they can do for you, but what they bring to you in terms of what they bring out of you. That's been my favorite part of this kind of like season of my life, is like, I can actually enjoy these relationships I have with people, because you don't realize like, exactly, everything is a relationship, like a business relationship, a personal relationship, but it all affects you, so it's all personal,
right?
And so that's been my husband and I were literally talking about this last week, and he was like, this has been such a transformation for you from like introvert to extrovert, and just like totally comfortable in every situation, and just like looking to have a good time and like enjoy whatever I can about every situation. And so it's interesting, the personal transition that I've made, and just my husband's just kind of like clapping and cheering me on, and I'm like, you're just so sweet. Like, he's just the best.
Awesome. Yeah. And you keep clapping from the couch. I'm gonna go out
right
find the party.
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna find the party.
I think that is often what we find in good relationships, right? Is very, very opposite, right? You always hear opposites attract. What is, especially being, I'm gonna go this route, being a woman in the business world. I think that I'm not going to go all feminist on anybody, but I think that there is definitely, when you talk about Matt being the face versus you, there is a difference in I think treatment, but also in expectation. How has that been? What have you experienced kind of in that regard?
Sure. Oh my gosh, it's been very interesting. So especially when we were doing our build out, and you're just trying to, there's 100 different people you have to talk to. And I remember at first, like, I would be calling these vendors and I just could not get a response. Or if I actually got a hold of them, it was like, yeah, I'll get it to you. And kind of like out of principle at first, I was like, oh no, they're going to get it to me. And then we started getting up to like deadlines and stuff. And then, my husband would call them and they would answer on the first time. They'd be like, I'll get that to you tomorrow. And so there was just this very obvious difference of treatment, which is unfortunate, but I don't know if I was overly surprised. Just a quick story. We had problems with our door one time. And so the company who was maintaining the door, you had to use an Allen wrench to dog and undog the door. And so he was telling me like, well, it's an old door, grease and dust and all that stuff. And he was like, and you're going to need a 1/8 inch Allen wrench. And I was like, okay. And he stopped and he like put his hand out and he was like, do you need to write this down? And I was like, no, I don't. I've dealt with Allen wrenches before.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just like, and I'm sure he really meant it nicely and like, hey, I don't want you to forget this, and I don't want you to get the wrong size. But it was just this whole, there's an undermining of competence.
Oh, 100%.
And so I feel like that's kind of the job of a Southern female business owner, has to include proving your competence daily. And eventually, honestly, like it becomes this like game almost, like, okay, you can underestimate me and then I'll kind of like overperform. And it's like this fun little give and take. But
and then you're going to pretend like you forgot. And then we're going to remind you.
Yes. But I will say, when we started getting up against those deadlines on our build out, it got very stressful and just, frustrating, obviously. But there's just this, I feel like there's this extra step that I have to take just to start at the same level of, if my husband were to call them. Because also I am younger and my husband is older. There's a 15-year age difference. And so he's kind of just got that, like, he's at that age where he's like, he still looks young, but he's got gray hair. So it's like, he's distinguished, but he's still like with it. So he's just at that perfect age where he gets all the respect. And so, and I know that I'm younger, and so I'm sure people don't understand the experience that I'm coming with and probably try to over explain, which I'm happy to. If I learn something new, that's great. I'll sit there and listen to your over explanation, sure. But it has been, for the most part, I would say that has been 5% of my experience. Everything else has been super great. We always joke that we may want to cut this, but when people will come in and they'll be like, you know what you should do, blah, 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 like tell me how to run my business. And it's always men.
Oh, of course.
And then the women who come in and say, this is amazing, how can I help?
Right.
And so it's almost like this different vibe that you get from the two different genders. But that's probably the biggest difference now that I think about it, is there's help and advice that's offered. And both are appreciated. I guess both, it ends up as advice either way, because I can take it or leave it. So.
Right. Yeah, and we're going to smile at you like we appreciate it regardless if it's helpful.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
I remember when I first took over this insurance agency, I called out just to tell my client, hey, this is who I am, and I'm really fabulous, and you should like me. And I remember one of the first men who answered, and he said, well, I didn't give you permission to buy that book of business. And I was like, oh, dang. Wow. Okay. And then it was that reality check, like, oh, okay, this is where we are. This is where we are. Okay. So I kind of braced myself. The next call, and it's this one. She's like, you're our new agent. Oh my goodness, I love female power. Yeah, this is so great. And I'm like, I so needed you. So I get off the phone all teary-eyed because I'm like, I just needed someone to be grateful.
Yeah.
And because I know what I bring to the table, and I think that's what it is. And sometimes I think it's so easy, and I've been there before, where you can judge a situation, or you can look at something from the outside and think you know what's going on. Yeah. Or think that your way is better. And it's not, because we're not as great as we think. And two, right, you have to remember, kindness is always going to rule out. And when you approach someone with kindness, whether you think your idea is great or not, like, just be nice.
Yeah, and there's always something to learn.
Oh, 100%.
Like that's the biggest thing. Like I feel like I'm just like a sponge, and honestly, even if somebody is condescending, I still listen to them, because it's like, maybe they have that attitude for a reason. I don't know, but there's just this, like, I feel like a lot of times people get to a certain point when they're just like, I know it all, or at least I have no interest in learning anything new, and I just do not understand that, because I'm always so interested in what I can learn from this situation. And I'll tell you, in business, there's plenty to learn, and you never stop it. I'm sure you know that. Yeah. But there's always something to learn, even if it's just a little conversation you have with somebody, and you can learn, oh, well, I guess, the way they worded that triggered me a little bit because, blah, blah, blah. And so I learned a little bit about myself. So maybe it's some advice that they give, and maybe it's just something you learn about yourself. But you always something to learn, which really kind of like helps me, like it knocks me down in terms of trying to like puff up my chest and prove myself if I feel like I've been condescended or something. And it's just like, well, what am I learning here? Like, oh, well, I'm learning I don't like being condescended. That's for sure. But we can work on that.
Yeah.
But I just feel like there's always something to learn from every interaction. And I would prefer it to be a great piece of advice. But sometimes it could just be what I learn about myself and maybe about the kinds of people I don't want to be around.
Exactly. Or how I would not like to talk to other people.
Exactly. Maybe they're a good example of what not to do.
Of course. I love that. And within our community or outside of our community, I think, what is the one thing that you would tell someone, whether they are a female business owner or whether they are looking to become, maybe they're just interested in entrepreneurship, what advice would you give them?
Oh, okay. So that's interesting. If there's no business experience, I feel like getting a job at some kind of startup or new business, and you realize it's so funny. We've been open a year now, and when we hire somebody new, they come in for official training, and these are our policies, and this is how we do things. But we've got one or two that have been there from the beginning, and we always joke about how, like, literally on our opening day, we had no policies, no procedures. Like, we didn't know how it was going to go. Like, cookies come out of the oven, and then where are they going to cool? And then how do they get on the trays? And then when do we put them in the display case? Like, it was just a wait and see. And so that's one thing I wasn't, especially as a control freak perfectionist. One thing that I had to get used to was just kind of like the fluidity of being a new business owner, but being part of a new business. And so if you can get involved in a new business in whatever capacity, like wherever your expertise lies, get involved in a new business, and you can just see how fluid the whole situation is, and how that's what I tell our GM. Sometimes she'll ask me questions and I'll be like, I don't know, but let's try this. And I try to tell her, like, we had no idea what we were doing when we opened, and every situation that comes up it's the first time it's come up. And so it's like, don't think that there's always an answer, and don't think that there's always a right answer. We're just going to try to figure out what the best course of action is right now. And if it's wrong, we'll do it again and figure something else out. But then also I would say, let go of any sense of control or perfectionism you have. If that is something you deal with, talk about it with your therapist.
Absolutely.
And get rid of that, because you cannot be a perfectionist and you cannot be a control freak as an entrepreneur. But surrounding yourself with that energy, even if you can't get into a new business, surround yourself with new business owners. Like, it really is, it's so fun to be around. I just had a lunch this morning with 2 other female business owners, and it's just such a different energy. Like, the problem solving, and this is what I'm going through, and then just the way you think about things is so different, because your options are limitless. Like, you're not operating within a box. You own the business. Right. You can do whatever. And the energy is so unique and beautiful and collaborative. And so even if you can't get into a new business before you start your own, surround yourself with those people, because it really is, it's just a different mindset. And if you're used to working a 9-to-5, that's a different mindset. If you're not used to working a 9-to-5, surround yourself with people who don't, and you'll easily kind of shift into that mindset when it's your time to start your own business.
Absolutely. I think those are all so great. All right, Meg. So, I just called you Meg. Was that offensive for you?
No, not at all. So
Okay.
listen, it's the weirdest question I've ever been asked is it Megan or Megan? And I just never knew there was a difference. I mean, it's just,
I would have always just said Megan.
Exactly. It's kind of like the dialect you bring to it, but it's just like, I don't know, it's just call me whatever you want.
As long as it's nice, I'm okay.
And because I'm a twin, and so I'm so used to being called somebody else's name anyway. It's like, I mean, if you just say something that rhymes with Megan, I'm happy, because you know who I am.
What is your twin's name?
Jessica. So it's not even close.
Yeah.
And so it's
Your parents were smart.
I know. And she said, my mom said she did that on purpose. She didn't want to do like a Megan and a Reagan.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm the youngest. And so my brother's name is Nathan, and then my sister's name is Alyssa, and then my twin sister's name is Jessica. So anytime I would get in trouble, it was always Nathan, Alyssa, Jessica, Megan. Yeah. And so
it's always angry.
Can you imagine if that rhymed? Like, she would just have, it would have been a tongue twister just to get onto me. So no, you can call me Meg, call me whatever you want.
Good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Makes me feel better. You always, I mean, sometimes I'll shorten names, like not even, and then you're like, oh no, they feel like, sometimes if you use someone's full name, they feel like they're getting in trouble. Or if you use a short name, they're like, you know, there's, my brother-in-law is Andrew. And if you call him Andy, he like, it's like, ew, it's so gross. And so you never want to call someone something they don't want to be called, right?
Really familiar. No, you're good to
or it's a trigger. So awesome. Well, as we start years, right? Typically, and I know obviously we're in the latter part of the year at this point.
I can't believe it.
I know, it's gone by very quickly. I typically always like to do a focal word, right, for the year. My word this year was overcome, just from the accident and from the mobility piece that I'm dealing with, right? And just from every day, whether it's in the home, in the office, right? Having that word that you will overcome whatever it is, right? Kind of similar to this too shall pass.
Sure.
But just that, do you ever do focal words? Do you ever have kind of a resolution, anything like that?
So I definitely have resolutions because I am a goal person.
Okay.
I do love a goal. Ask my husband. And it's interesting. So I love the focal word because sometimes with a goal, I get kind of misguided in terms of like, I focus on the goal instead of, well, I want to be the kind of person who achieves this goal. So it's like, I don't want to be at the top of Mount Everest. I want to be the kind of person who can summit Mount Everest. You know what I mean? And so, no, I love that. So I do resolutions and they're very focused. And then, I mean, this is a whole day process for me. And I will go back and I will work it back into it. Like, well, this is where I want to be. Then how do I get there from here? And so I do love a plan, as we've already talked about.
Yes.
Give me a plan and I will give you success. So no, I don't have necessarily a focal word, but I do love that idea in terms of just keeping a concept in your mind, which I think I do energetically anyway. Yeah. Like there are I do things in the morning from a routine standpoint to get me into a certain mindset. And so I think it's the same concept.
Absolutely.
But I actually do like that as an idea and I'll probably adopt that for 2024.
Yes.
It's like, just have it whatever on the background of my phone and maybe on the on the mirror and things like that. But I love that as a concept.
Of course. If you were to have to sum up your goals in one word, what is a word that you could put on it?
Improvement.
Okay.
And that is just because for so long I was a perfectionist and like that was the goal, right? And for me, and I'm going to get real deep, but for me, perfectionism was just a defense mechanism. And so to focus on improvement, like actual improvement and not perfectionism for the sake of not having to be accountable for anything, that's been a really big transition for me. And so and that's something I do is I take where I'm currently at and I just figure out how I can get a little bit better at it. And then eventually you'll get to that goal. But I think for me, especially when I think about the goal and then I think about where I'm at, I think, everything will be great when I'm at this goal. And then you forget to really just enjoy the journey of it or the process of becoming this kind of person. And so I think improvement would probably be a great way to summarize my goals.
That's awesome. And I think you always hear taking a small, very minute percentage of change creates habits within ourselves. And so often, I think you always shoot to the end, right? And the end goal is, for me, I want to walk unassisted. I want that to be the end goal. But you forget that just doing exercises daily or just doing these small things will help improve along the way.
Yes.
Because I think for anybody, wherever you are, whether it's job, workplace, home, or job and workplace are the same thing. Heather, you're very smart. Hey-o. But wherever you are, even on vacation, I think there is often this piece of ourselves. I think it's just the human nature that wants to be somewhere that you're not, right? We have straight hair, we want curly hair. We have blue eyes, we want brown. Whatever it is. It's summer, we want it to be winter. But in the winter, we want it to be summer. I think it's just that ugly beast, right? That always strives for something that is, and I don't know. I just don't even know what that is in us.
Totally.
And I think having your mindset as far as just the improvement, knowing that you're going to see it and you're going to be able to look back and see how far you've come.
Yes.
Instead of looking from where you are, it always seems so far to go.
Yes. And I listened to this thought work coach. She has a podcast and she calls it the infinite 1%. And it's because the difference between 0 and 1% is infinite. You're like doing nothing towards your goals versus doing something, which is at least getting you further. And it's even the distance between 0 and 1% is even bigger than the distance between 99 and 100%, when obviously mathematically they're the same. But from an energy standpoint, it is doing nothing towards your goal versus doing something is infinite. And that's exactly what we're talking about. It's like, it's just improvement. And sometimes it's a lot of improvement. Some weeks it's crazy improvement. And then some weeks it's like all I can do to do anything towards my goals, but still doing it, because that infinite 1% really does make all the difference.
It does. And I think as you get older, right, and as you see things, all of that then comes into perspective a little bit more, and it makes it that much easier to say, okay, I'm ready for the change mentally and physically, but then actually putting in the work and the effort. So I love that. That's awesome.
Good, I'm glad.
I would encourage anybody listening today, if you don't have either a focal word or a goal for the remainder of 2023, almost forgot what year it was.
Right.
Special. Then I would encourage you to think about, make your list of goals, or think about what have you already seen, and let's look back at ways that we can be grateful for growth that has already happened, or maybe for events that have now caused you to want to make a difference or make a change. And then look forward. What are the things that you want to accomplish? Or maybe it's something that you want to have your word, whether it's a great word or whether it's not, just having something that kind of encapsulates what you would like to accomplish. I think those are often ways, right? It's taking that first step, and the first step is knowing what are we trying to achieve. So I'd encourage, let's make the end of 2023 fabulous. And even if the year hasn't started out the way that you wanted it to go, we do have a way to change, right?
Yeah.
No better time than right now. And we would love to hear about that. So definitely let us know so that we can cheer you along. And Megan, it's always a joy, and I'm so grateful that you took time to spend with me today.
Thank you so much. No, this has been so great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Now, in closing, I have to ask,
Okay.
what do you find most precious?
Most precious. Okay, a little bit of story time. This whole thing has been story time.
I love
it. Okay, so first, it's, I think, gotta be laughter. I think that is so, first of all, a kid's laughter. I can't. Like the little giggle of a baby or a toddler. But then also, I have lived abroad in several different countries, and there is nothing that just breaks down barriers or judgments or anything more than laughter. And it is so bonding and literally healing. Like, I just, there's nothing that makes me happier than just like tears streaming down my face, laughing at something, usually at myself. So I would say laughter, and then this is going to be the quick story time, but sunflowers for me are such a source of joy, because so my grandmother passed several years ago, but I was involved in the corporate world back when I lived in Nashville, and every time I would go to a different city to open up a store, my grandma would send me yellow roses. And so I always associated her with yellow roses, and she passed before my wedding. And so I was at a flower shop looking for yellow roses because we were going to do one of those dedication chairs at the wedding. So we just had a plaque with her picture and her name, and I was going to put yellow roses because I was like, oh, that's quintessential grandma. And then I couldn't find any yellow roses, but then I just like zeroed in on this sunflower, literally one sunflower. And I was like, that's my grandma, because she was so like happy and pleasant. And so I got a sunflower, and we did it. We got married at the end of Ross's Pier. And so it was
beautiful,
gorgeous, but it was also the end of a pier. So it was kind of windy. So I just remember walking down the aisle and thinking like, I bet that sunflower blew off an hour ago. And so I remember walking down the aisle, and I looked back, and everybody's hair is like blown in their face. It's getting caught in their lipstick. And then that sunflower is just like chilling there, like not being bothered at all. And so it was there, and it was there the whole wedding, and it was just so beautiful. And so to me, it just felt like my grandma was there at the wedding. And so I've always associated sunflowers with A, my grandma, but B, just like her kind of personality. And then the older I get, the more I realize just how precious she really was. She was always so positive. And the more people you meet, and the more you kind of see who you connect with and stuff. And it's like, oh, I just wish I could just like be friends with my grandma.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I think it's, for me, it's going to be laughter, because it's such a healing process.
And universal.
Exactly, universal. And then also sunflowers, because they remind me of my grandmother, and then they just put me in such a special, beautiful place.
I love that so much. You talked about how your grandmother was perfect and positive, and that was my granny, who just passed away in February. We always called her Perfect Patty. And she was so positive, just absolutely refused to be offended. I mean, you could insult her to her face, and she'd be like, oh, well, darling, aren't you sweet? And just walk away. And if I could learn how to do anything, it would live a life that is unaffended. And it is a choice, right?
It is. Oh my gosh, the mental process. Yeah, I mean, that takes some mental work for me. I'm ready to look for the negative.
Right.
I think that's what I like about my grandma, is she was just always looking for the positive. When you get towards the end of your life, you know, you want to focus on the positives, and you want to have a good time. And I think that's something I didn't appreciate when I was younger, is like she just wanted to enjoy the last years of her life, and that's why she was so incredibly pleasant and so happy. And it was like, so that's what I try to draw from my experience with my grandma. It's like, oh, so she was just really, really wise. And she was just like, I'm just here to have a good time. And so that's what I'm trying to do. Is like, a lot of times I'll think of her, and that's what I try to do. Is like, I'm just here to have a good time.
And look at the legacy that they left.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
For, and yes, encouraging you to take the best qualities and characteristics.
Yeah.
And
all the
strive for those. Absolutely.
You know, I know. I love her so much.
That's awesome. I know it's when they go, which I love that she was there, right? And you had the flower, and that it was the only thing unscathed from this wind, right?
Everybody was affected by this wind.
Absolutely. Yeah. But I love that, and I love the little pieces of joy that you get. I had a banana popsicle last night, which is so silly, and playing a card game with my kids at my in-laws' house. And the second they gave it to me, I just started bawling, because it reminded me of sitting at my grandparents' house on the farm and eating banana. And they were like, "Are you okay?" I was like, "Yes, I'm fine." But I couldn't stop.
I love it.
Just the memories, whether it's a sound or a smell or a song they used to listen to. And my grandfather loved "I'll Fly Away." And so anytime I hear that hymn, I'm like, it's my grandfather's song. And so you think of those things, and it's as much as there's a void that they're not here. The memory of them, right, that we get to hold dear is everywhere, and kind of that constant reminder, whether it's a sunflower or a banana popsicle.
I love it.
It's so random. But thank you so much for sharing them.
No, thank you. That was actually a really fun story to like relive and put me back in that space. And so I appreciate the question. Thank you.
Absolutely. We are so excited for y'all to listen and join, and whether it's a memory of a loved one, whether it's setting a goal, whether it's looking at potentially opening a business or being a woman in the industry, and some tips and tricks. I hope that y'all have enjoyed this as much as we have enjoyed being together today and sharing. And we can't wait for you to join us on the next episode of Heather's Most Precious. Thanks, y'all.
Heather's Most Precious is brought to you with love by the Hendrickson Agency, an insurance agency serving all of Georgia and Tennessee. The Hendrickson Agency, properly protecting your most precious possessions. Support for Heather's Most Precious is provided by Study.com, which offers SAT and ACT study materials and even has resources for AP and college credit courses. Listeners of Heather's Most Precious get 30% off their first 3 months of any subscription level with offer code PRECIOUS. Just go to Study.com and use offer code PRECIOUS at checkout. Heather's Most Precious is produced by Chattanooga Podcast Studios and is part of the Podnooga Network. Find out more at ChattanoogaPodcastStudios.com. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back soon with another episode of Heather's Most Precious.